session topic is 21st century education, preparing for the future. I think it's quite an interesting topic, and we have an interesting group of panelists here, and I think we'll be able to come up with some interesting thoughts. And we'll be exploring the role of education and learning and skills in the context of an increasingly interconnected world. We all live in a very, very digital world. I think every single one of us here has a smartphone or access to the internet in some capacity, which means that we have unlimited information in the palms of our hands. So what does that mean for education and learning, and more importantly, skills, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be successful in the 21st century and beyond? And I think I will start with Sandy, because you are very much interested in education, you're an entrepreneur, and you've started a set of schools as well. So I mean, given your background, what do you think about the sort of role of education in the digital world and key skills for the future?
I think we've had a huge revolution where we have something in our hands, which is the mobile phone, which has more knowledge than the greatest libraries in the world, and therefore content is not an issue. I think the world of today and of tomorrow requires us to develop a very different kind of skills, and these skills are largely known as higher order skills and cornerstone skills. And the skills are very different, very similar to the things you need to be successful in the real world. So when we learn in school or in college, just think that how would you be behaving and working in the real world? In the real world, you would be working with groups of people. You'd be working in small teams, larger teams. In the real world, you'd be starting with a set of problems that you need to solve. In the real world, you need to be very creative. In the real world, you need to learn to work with each other collaboratively. In the real world, you need to be able to solve conflicts. I think in my personal experience, I've seen that many a good idea doesn't get implemented because of conflict and poor culture within the workspace. Similarly, we need skills, cornerstone skills, the ability to analyze, to cross-reference, to research, and these are the skills that you're going to be hired for tomorrow. These are the very same skills that you will need if you decide to turn entrepreneurial. So education has to therefore completely transform itself so that while we learn content, we develop all these incredible skills.
Okay, I think, this whole idea of skills is very interesting. Bennett, we were talking earlier about the future of jobs. Yep. And with the digital world, everything is becoming automated. And what does that really mean for human capital and the future of jobs, and what skills are required? Because we were also earlier talking about how students are often told to be critical thinkers. Think critically, think critically. What exactly does that mean? And what does that mean in the context of the future jobs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we get asked that all the time. If I go to particularly a liberal arts college and study, what job will I get? And in that context, I always turn the question around and say, what job will you create? The major difference between ourselves and robots is robots don't create jobs. They take jobs, they use jobs, but people create jobs and give robots those jobs or give other human beings the jobs. So one of the questions I think that is, in fact, skill developed, and be really clear, skill isn't something you're born with. A skill is something you develop through practice. So when we talk about the skill of critical thinking, you're not either a critical thinker or you're not, you actually develop that ability. And I think of the critical thinker as saying, why does it need to be that way? Or what other ways could it be? Or what other things could you do with this? Or what else might be a situation, as opposed to it's that way now and always will be. So one of the critical skills, and I actually like thinking of the institutions I'm helping build not as 21st century institutions, but at least 22nd century institutions. If what we're doing now, building schools, building colleges, developing universities, doesn't last at least 100 years, we have failed in the design. It crumbled too early. And the great institutions, the measure of their effectiveness is measured not over decades, but over centuries. So I think the skill that we're looking at as a critical thinking skill is the ability to question. Not, I don't like it, that's a criticizing skill, but a, what else could be? How else could it be done? Who else could do it? How could we do it better?
Okay. And Pushkar, I think Bennett was talking about the liberal arts. And you are a professor of the liberal arts in an engineering school. So what do you think is the future of the liberal arts in the context of critical thinking and work and how to sort of, be a job creator to some extent?
I necessarily don't think in terms of jobs, but I'm not looking for a job. But what I found, and this is, I think, my third year at Pilani Goa, is that there is a lot of curiosity among students because they have reached an age where they're starting to wonder, why on earth are they doing engineering? Many of them are doing engineering, I think, and I've written about it a lot, is because their parents want them to, because doing anything in the arts means they have failed, they are no good, and the failure tag is attached to doing anything else other than engineering or medicine or something else. And their heart is not there. And if you see that in context, the fact that I'm at one of the premier engineering colleges in the country, the same story could be told for just about every engineering institution. Now the key is and many of these students are taking off because they are turning around and now telling their parents, see, you wanted me to get an engineering degree, I'm done. So over the last 2 years, I have written recommendation letters for students who have gone off to do political science, economics, and there's another reason why they are in engineering, because there are not enough good liberal arts institutions. So if you go and don't get, somebody told, well, I didn't get economics at Delhi University at a North Campus college. I said, I understand. I wanted to study economics. I said, fine. What next? So I'm switching back to economics. I'm headed abroad, and this is what I'm going to do. I said, great. But that's entirely the point. It's not so much about critical thinking. They are thinking critically, many of them, and they are beginning to question. I think we might see a revolt of sorts by young people, that this is not what we want to study. And jobs come with doing what you like. There will be problems, but your jobs will come. Jobs can be created, and because technology is intervening in such a big way, the possibilities are endless. You see, especially in India, China, all over Asia, there are immense possibilities. The government has to do its bit, which is not happening. The private sector has to do its bit. That's not happening. So yes, those problem areas remain.
Yeah, now, coming back to the whole idea of technology, Jerry, I guess you're a technocrat, you're an entrepreneur, you're developing smart cities all over the world. Wanted to get your ideas on technology and, I guess, knowledge, because to some extent, I think knowledge may be becoming commodified. We all have access to unlimited information, so I guess maybe it's not about what we know, it's about what we do with what we know. Now, in the context of technology, what does that mean for you?
Well, it is true that with what we can get on a mobile phone, we have essentially not only facts, but we have knowledge of immense proportion. So the easy answer is, well, we need to have wisdom, right? The next level up above knowledge. Wisdom's pretty hard to define, and pretty hard to generate when you're young, so I think you need to look for easier answers. So I would be interested to ask a couple of questions just so I know what you're thinking. A couple test questions. Raise your hands yes on the yes side. How many of you think you want to invent something in the next 10 years? You're going to school so you can invent something to make life better. How many want to be inventors? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, fairly small proportion, okay? So the rest of you, how long do you think you will have your first job? How many years? How many think you'll have your first job for 50 years? Anyone? 40, 30 years, 10, 5 years. You're going to stay in your job for 5 years? All right, so if the rest of you are going to work, or are you just going to go to school? All right.
Like a good measure of realism here.
I see this.
Yeah.
It's eye-opening. So let's think about this. If most of you think you won't hold your job more than 5 years, you're going to live to be between 80 and 100, maybe 120 based on medicine by the time you grow old. That means you've got about 60 years of working life, 5 years of job. That means you've got how many jobs in front of you? 12. How are you going to learn job 2, job 3, job 4? The simple answer is you need to learn to be learners, most of all, because you're going to do job 1, and that's going to run out, the machine's going to take over, Africa's going to get on its feet and take away India's advantage, and you're suddenly going to say, what's job 2? And you better be ready to learn. So if you ask yourself, what are you doing in high school right now, I'd say, be sure you're learning how to learn, how to add something new on your own, because that's going to be the big assignment. Now, technology is going to be a big boost to that. And what you can do with a mobile phone, what you can do on the internet, fabulous way to learn. But I'd make that the most important thing. We can then talk about good technologies and where technology is headed in cities, but if you aren't learners, it's going to be a tough life.
I think Dr. Bennett said something very interesting. He said that critical thinking is challenging things, challenging assumptions, questioning things. So I want to ask you a question, do a mini poll as well. How many of you really love your classrooms? What you learn in your classroom? So that's possibly about 20%. I think a really good question to ask yourselves and maybe have a conversation with the teachers is, look, how can I enjoy my learning experience? And maybe you can tell your teachers how you'd like to learn. I know it's a far-fetched thought. Another sort of challenging of assumptions that Dr. Pushkar and I were doing outside, that why do we wear a tie, especially in a place like New Delhi? 9 months of the year, it's pretty hot, or in Goa, where he comes from. There's no case whatsoever to wear a tie. School uniform, why do we wear school uniform? What about education or about any of us is uniform? We're all different, we're all unique. There was a talk of developing your passions and interests. If we consider everyone to be the same, how do we develop our passions and interests? So these are tiny examples of challenging assumptions, and I think the time has come for all of us to stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. Let's start a mini revolution, and maybe it begins today with the One World Conference, One Globe Conference.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the challenging assumption. I have an example of that. There was a game, some of you may have played or may have predated you, but called Zelda. And the character in Zelda has to run around this island, picking up things, little jewels or whatever. And whenever they do that, they get a score and they get some power and they go on. I don't know if anybody's played the game, but my son did a lot of that, annoyingly, when he was young. And the key thing is, every time this character runs into a jewel or a box or in anything, there's this voice that says, what shall we do with that? What shall we do with that? What shall we do with that? And that's kind of what I think of in terms of looking for problems, opportunities, situations. You think, here's a glass, or is it a glass? What could I do with that? Or here's a person. What could I do with this person? Or here's an idea. What could I do with this idea? And I always have this little voice of this Zelda character going, what could I do with that? What could happen with this? What could go on here? As kind of the way to think about curiosity. It's that sense of, what else could you do here? And that's actually what leads to job creation. It leads to new models in business. It leads to innovations, which aren't really always amazing and new. They're just a little bit better. So if you ask, if I could make this just a little bit better, what could I do with that? That's the kind of thinking I'm characterizing here as that sort of 21st century creativity, looking for the opportunity, but looking for the opportunity in something that's not quite right today, because that is big, right? There's lots of that.
And it relates to the whole idea of problem solving, as we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely, I mean, nobody hires you to do a job when they don't have a problem, right? So jobs represent somebody's concept of a problem that needs to be solved. Learn to spot what problems are for companies, for NGOs, for governments, for individuals, and you're already pretty far down the road to defining what a job for you could be if you have the skill set and the desire to actually solve those kinds of problems.
So there's a view sometimes that engineers tend to think inside the box too often. So one of the things we ask our students to do, we're in New York City, we're actually in a poor part of Brooklyn, so there's a lot of poverty around us. So we had our students go out into the neighborhoods and interview people about their lives. What was missing? What did they need? And then they came back to the school and used technology, their engineering skills, to invent solutions, better ways to deliver mental health care, better ways to get food to an elderly person. So I've asked this question again, have you been doing that? Have you been out in the neighborhoods looking at problems and saying, I think I got a solution to that? How many have done that? So, okay, so to say you're thinking about coming to school in America, I would recommend you ask your teachers to give you some of those projects, because we're going to ask you, are you ready to help solve problems? We're going to not just ask you, you want to be a good student, do you want to get an A? That's not going to get you into American school. What's going to get you in American school is I have a vision of what I want to do to make the world better, and I need your knowledge to make it happen. So I want to be in your school because I'm then going to be a powerful person to make change.
I think this is a very, very powerful thought, and the engineers that I know, the entrepreneurs that I know, the philosophers that I know, the architects that I know, the doctors that I know, when I speak to them and ask them what is that one thing that made them successful people, they say that it's their curiosity to do what they're doing better. So they want to do what they're doing a little better. And I would really encourage you guys to go out into the world. It doesn't matter if you're 10 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old, 18. I have a lot of respect for teachers and educators, but go out into the world, whichever area you're interested in, whatever be your interest, go and seek people who've reached the pinnacle of their respective careers in those areas, and talk to them and ask them questions. I think there'll be some incredible clues that that they would share, and those could be the stepping stones for you, for your life going forward.